But we begin this hour with the Trump administration's immigration crackdown and its ongoing disregard for the fundamental constitutional right of due process. You know, something light for the early morning. Late Friday night, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of a gay Guatemalan man identified as OCG in court filings. The man was deported to Mexico despite fearing persecution and telling U.S. authorities he had been raped and held captive there. U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy wrote in his 14-page ruling that OCG's removal likely, quote, lacked any semblance of due process and that, quote, OCG did not receive what the Constitution requires. And this is obviously not an isolated case. It is at least the third that we know of improperly deported man that a judge has ordered the Trump administration to return to this country. For weeks, the administration has battled over a judge's order to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the administration admitted was mistakenly removed to a notorious Salvadorian prison, despite an immigration judge ruling that should have protected him from being deported there. And earlier this week, a federal appeals court refused to lift another judge's order to facilitate the return of a 20-year-old Venezuelan refugee identified as Christian, who was deported earlier this year to El Salvador, despite having pending asylum claims here in this country. Joining us now are David Bier, Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute, and Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward. In this new case of OCG, Skye, I want to get into the word facilitate because we've heard it from the Supreme Court. And I had talked to some folks in the administration who said they were happy that they just said the word facilitate because it gave them a gray area. No one knew what the hell it meant. But this judge says, quote, the court notes that facilitate in this context should carry less baggage than in several other notable cases. OCG is not held by any foreign government. Defendants have declined to make any argument that facilitating his return would be costly, burdensome, or otherwise impede the government's objectives. The court anticipates that defendants will take at least the same level of action as is routine to return lawfully removed aliens. It seems like he's learned his lesson from some of these other cases where the administration kind of waffled on the word facilitate, finally.
Yep, the administration keeps trying to double down on what Justice Jackson has called catch me if you can justice. And you see the judges, though, being very strong, that this is not what we do in the United States. You see them becoming more savvy to the administration's tricks. And I think that as concerned as we are for all of the people, and by the way, there are so many who have been removed without process in many instances. The good piece of this is that the judges are not having it. And I think you're going to continue to see that build over the next few weeks.
It is just unfathomable how many men and women who are in America legally have been deported by the Trump administration. It's a level of sloppiness and disregard for human rights and the Constitution that it's unimaginable in American history. Can you talk about how you went through and you documented all of the men and women who were illegally taken from America, even though they were here under the law?
Right. So the Trump administration expelled, really rendered these individuals from Venezuela to El Salvador to a prison. They are imprisoning them at our expense. Again, no charges, no trials, not even a hearing before their removal. We went through and we documented at least 50 cases. 50 out of the 250 who were sent, 50 cases of people who came legally to the United States. They never violated any immigration law. And the whole premise of the administration's argument here is people came here illegally, so they have no due process. They have no rights whatsoever under the Constitution. These people came legally at the invitation of our government. They were detained and then ultimately expelled without a hearing, without due process. And that's the concern here for everyone who whether you are a U.S. citizen, whether you're a legal permanent resident, whether you're someone else who's come here legally. This is what the administration's advertisement to the world of what America does to people who come to our country. We don't give you any rights. And that should be not only scare immigrants who are coming here, but Americans who are traveling abroad, because we will have no right to object when a country does that to a U.S. citizen traveling abroad to an authoritarian country who does these kind of things.
And your study is not the only one that has found this, right? Over and over and over again, reporters, think tanks like yours, other organizations, random people have looked through these lists and found it. So it's not just like you guys saying this.
And Sky, let's keep the conversation talking on U.S. citizens.
Yes.
And I would put up this NBC News headline: U.S. citizen with real ID handcuffed and held in immigration raid before being released. I'm quoting here: apparently a real ID is not valid anymore. He has a real ID, his cousin Shayla Venegas said. We all made sure we have the real ID and went through the protocols the administration is asking for. He has his real ID, and then they see him, and I guess because his English isn't fluent and or because he's brown, it's fake. It's not real. And I read that also because, I was at a memorial service yesterday in Chicago and was told by a friend that the son of a friend of theirs, American citizen, snatched up by immigration. They couldn't find him. They have found him. But now they're having conversations about whether they should carry passports with them to prove their citizenship. I mean, and I bring this up because, Trump ran on deporting violent, illegal, quote unquote, illegals. And now you have law-abiding American citizens fearing that they could get snatched up, especially if they're black or brown.
And it was never about immigration policy. And that's what we're seeing. Because if it was, you would actually see the president using lawful processes, which he's not interested in. We have said that every single American should be concerned about these cases. And we've been saying that at Democracy Forward for some time as we've litigated these cases in the courts, because we know if it can happen to Mr. Garcia, if it can happen to people on planes where judges tell you to turn the planes around and the administration gleefully, the judge found, did not. It can happen to any of us. And that's really what due process is. And it seems that this administration is just inconvenienced by the rights that everyone in this country has. They are inconvenienced by the Constitution. It is clear that their strategy is being run out of the White House by people like Stephen Miller, who were not even lawyers, who appear to, even yesterday in his tweets, be completely inconvenienced and upset that the American people have a constitution that entitles them to rights and that it is judges' jobs to enforce those rights.
Well, the president himself has said we can't possibly give due process to all these people.
Right.
That is, well, sir, the Constitution says persons. It does not say citizens will have the right.
Well, and that is actually what it means to live in America, and that what it means is what it means to be an American. And for all of the rhetoric out of the White House about how people are a threat to our way of life, it is this that's a threat to the American way of life. It is due process that separates this country from places like Russia and Iran and China. And you are not seeing this administration actually double down on the things that are uniquely American.
David, what Sky was talking about, the judges kind of getting savvy to what the administration has done. They also seem to be getting irritated, right? And frustrated. And I've never been in front of no judge, but I do imagine watching The Good Wife and Scandal and stuff, when you piss them off, they will come back at you. So I guess my question, I think a lot of people have this question, what's the recourse that judges have when the administration continues to either piss them off or defy their orders?
Look, we have seen an escalation even at the Supreme Court level. It's kind of unprecedented for the Supreme Court to act so quickly to stop Alien Enemies Act expulsions from the United States. So we can see an escalation in what they're ordering the Trump administration to do, taking away the powers that the administration is claiming. And ultimately, they can hold them in contempt. Now, this is something that the House of Representatives is upset about. They want to change the law and effectively prevent judges from being able to hold this administration in contempt, which would jeopardize all of our rights in the United States, because this is the ultimate power that judges have to hold someone in criminal contempt for violating their orders.
But in the immediate near term, what about these men and women who the U.S. government, judges have said they are unlawfully detained and taken out of the country, bring them back? When are they going to be brought back?
Right.
Well, I do think you see the judges escalating the tools that they have. You see the judges over the last week asking the government really hard questions, bringing them in, saying you have to explain what you're doing. What are you doing to give people process, to give them access to the lawyers? And so I do think that you're going to see, like you said, the judges and the courts do have power. They do have power now to enforce their orders, and you're seeing that. You're already seeing questions of contempt in a number of cases.
But I wrote down the word defiance because that's all we have seen from the president and his administration. The courts say, do this. I don't care the language they use. Facilitate. Go to the thesaurus. It's a bring the man home. And they've done nothing, whether it's an order from the Supreme Court or a federal judge or a district judge. And so at what point, what can be done when the Trump administration flat out ignores a very clear ruling from the Supreme Court? Because I have no confidence that the Trump administration, the president, will listen to the Supreme Court despite what the president has said he would do.
Right.
And instead, bring the leader of that country into the Oval Office.
Right.
They both saying, I'm not sending him back and I'm not asking for him.
Right. Well, I'll just say, I think that this is a place where the president and the administration is pushing way too far. First of all, you have contempt proceedings that are going to happen. I mean, these judges have said. And so the American people are going to see that on display. But poll after poll, and the most recent one says over 80% of the American people, including many of the people who are in the president's base, believe that people in this country should follow court orders and that the president should follow court orders. And so there is going to be political accountability. The people ultimately, I do think, are going to have to hold this administration accountable and the allies in Congress who seem to want to be able to pull the rug out from under the American people and render the courts, which are the actual institutions that protect our rights, to try to render them meaningless.
But they don't have armies. I guess I'm just like,
Right.
how do they force it? You put contempt on the DOJ lawyers, and then
there are professional disciplinary proceedings. And by the way, you're going to see a similar cast of characters in this Massachusetts case that you talked about from Friday. There's a similar lawyer, the same lawyer that's also in Judge Boasberg's case here in Washington. So I think that there is professional responsibility consequences. There is civil contempt that can lead to fines and imprisonment that cannot be pardoned. And then there are criminal contempt proceedings. And I think, unfortunately, this administration is getting so close to the fire, you're going to start seeing those things play out. And the judges have made it clear that they are taking their authority seriously.